Alright, team, so we're back, of course, talking about some more Final Fantasy VII, and of course, the other day, January 31st, was the 26th anniversary for FF7, and we'd covered a bunch of random shit that day, but I'd said in that video there wasn't really anything out there in terms of information or news or whatever the case, involving like Remake or Rebirth or anything like that. It's actually not entirely true, because Yoshinori Kitase had actually done an interview with VG247 that I just hadn't seen until after making that video. Now, the interview itself is obviously about FF7 as a whole, but he does touch on, like, Part 2 and Part 3 when it comes to the Remake project, and how there are going to be new story elements. I think it's important to talk about just because there are people out there that think, like, there's going to be nothing new, because they've said in the past that it's going to be the FF7 story, right? So people take that, I guess, as, like, gospel, as in, like, nothing new at all. Obviously, there's going to be things that are expanded, as in, like, side quests and, like, story elements and stuff, just expanded for a more modern video game. People think that there's going to be nothing new, as in nothing's changed at all, and it's just essentially the same FF7 story that we had back in like 1997, and obviously they're not going to come and do like a FF7 remake and not add new shit in terms of like an actual story element, not just expanding the game as a whole. And obviously if you played Remake Part 1, right, FF7 Remake, I don't know how you could possibly think that it's going to be the exact same story going forward. We're obviously not going to read over the entire interview. A lot of it's just about like the history of FF7, which you probably already know this shit if you're a big fan of Final Fantasy VII. But we're going to read over a few of the question answers that I did think were interesting. So they say, something I love about Final Fantasy VII is the feeling that at the time, the team were just adding and adding ideas, and not necessarily worrying about how something might fit in. The result is a world with amazing breadth. When you're in Midgar, it seems hard to even imagine a more traditional RPG location like Calm would even exist in the same world. And when you're at Calm, the idea of a place like the Gold Saucer feels outright futuristic. Then suddenly you're snowboarding. Was this a conscious idea during development, or was it something that just happened as artists got to grips with the 3D tools? Kitase says, during development we had a policy of putting in as many of the interesting ideas that the team brought to the table as we could. Our thinking was not to worry too much about alignment or consistency and to treat it like a child's toy box. We felt that stuffing in as much cool and interesting stuff as possible would create an even bigger feeling of wonder and excitement. This was not so much a deliberate approach though, but more like the spirit that the Final Fantasy team had from the start. So I personally thought that was kind of interesting because I'm not sure if I've ever heard the devs talk about that specific topic before, which explains why there is such like jarring locations, because like Gold Saucer is very, very different to like every location, right? Calm is pretty typical of like an RPG location. Midgar is quite different as well. The only thing that's kind of comparable to Midgar would really be Junon. And that's really only because it's like kind of a modernized town, but even Junon's vastly different to Midgar or any other location in FF7. But this would also probably explain like the kind of weird, quirky shit that's in FF7, like all the different minigames from like the marching in Junon to like the CPR minigame in Lower Junon to the snowboarding minigame, right? Because like Aeris dies, right? And we boot up disc 1, we move to like the next location, which is like Icicle Inn or whatever. And then we're snowboarding down a mountain. It's so weird. That's part of the charm of the game. And it seems like that was not necessarily intentional, but they were just kind of rolling with any ideas that sounded fun or cool for the game. And that's why you have so much weird shit. And that probably extends into like character dialogue and all kinds of other aspects of the game. So they're going to say, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to solve an age-old mystery. If you follow certain side quests, you can get the key to re-enter Midgar in the late game. At this stage, if you enter the Sector 5 church, you see Aeris tending to the flowers, but when you step closer, she flickers and disappears, like a ghost. Strangely, talking to an unrelated NPC in a different area prevents this event from happening. For years, fans have debated the intended meaning of this event, or even if it is a glitch. Can you comment on it from the development side? And Kitase simply replies with, I will leave this to the players' imaginations, which is kind of frustrating. So Aerith's ghost is obviously an iconic thing from OG FF7, and as the interviewer mentions, it is debated on whether or not it's intentional or a glitch, and there's definitely something wrong with like the Sector 5 church in terms of the way the characters load. Like even when you walk through the door, you actually see that the kids are out of position for just very, very briefly. You see the little girl like warp to the flower bed, so there's some merit to being a glitch. But I've always liked the idea of it being intentional. For one, we know that there are like ghosts, or you can like see dead people with the FF7 world. We know it's like Advent Children and beyond and stuff like that, right? But also the fact that the little girl's dialogue actually changes after Aerith disappears, which I've always found to be particularly interesting. So the way this Aerith ghost thing actually works is that when you walk through the doors of the church, there's actually a trigger for when you walk forward, it makes Aerith disappear, right? But if you actually move fast enough, that trigger doesn't load and Aerith stays there permanently. And if that happens, you can go up and talk to the little girl, and she talks about watering the flowers. But if Aerith is completely gone, she asks where the flower lady is. So the fact that the little girl actually addresses whenever Aerith disappears, like she's asking where'd the flower lady go, is why I've always thought that it's intentional. Plus, when it comes to like the loading issues, if you want to call it that, with the church, the difference here is that when you walk through the door, the little girl's out of position, Reno's actually behind you at the door, little boy's not even fully loaded yet. They all kind of reposition to where they're supposed to be, right? But Aerith is constantly always there. And you walk forward, she starts blinking and then goes away, which is a very intentional effect, right? It's not like she just despawns when you walk forward. They would have to like go out of their way to make her blink and then go away entirely. Add on top of all this the fact that there's a dummied NPC for this area over by this save point that actually has these lines that say, I saw her, I really did. This woman just disappeared right there around the old church. I waited around a long time, but she never came out again. I tell you, it's one of them haunted churches. Oh, shiver, shake. And look, I know that's a dummied NPC that's like cut content, so it technically doesn't matter or count if you want to call it that, but why the hell would that NPC have that dialogue about a girl disappearing or the church being haunted if the Aeris ghost was not intentional? So yeah, we probably could have done a whole like dedicated video to the Aeris ghost thing if we wanted to. I just want to get my thoughts on that. So yeah, Kitase not answering, it's kind of whatever. They're based on the lore of FF7 and what's in the game files and the way she actually disappears in the church. I just always found it to be an actual intentional thing, even if they don't want to say that it is. And we move on. So they go on to say, going into the compilation, you and the team had a chance to change, reveal, or retcon elements of the story if you wanted to. For instance, Rufus and Song appeared to die in FF7, but then revealed as alive in Advent Children, and even outright revealing that humans did survive wholly at the end. What was it like making story decisions like this, changing story elements and revealing new information without changing the impact of the original game? To which Kitase says, we approached the FF7 Remake project with the aim to make it something that could be enjoyed by both fans of the original game and people who did not know it. I've also had experiences where a game that I loved and had a lot of fun with in the past was remade, and I bought it and played it out of the overwhelming nostalgia. It's enjoyable for a while, but the fun from the nostalgia only really lasts through the first sections. I realized this halfway through and didn't carry on playing. Because of this, I decided that Final Fantasy VII Remake would not just appeal to nostalgia, but would include a new story as well to feel both nostalgic and fresh at the same time. The result of this is that for Part 2 and Part 3, we were able to give fans the excitement of wondering which parts will be 100% faithful to the original and where the new elements will be added. So that, of course, right there is the main talking point from this interview, is Kitase confirming that there's going to be straight up new stuff with this game, and not just them expanding shit, because he talks about it's not just appealing to nostalgia, there's a brand new story as well, and you're going to have to kind of wonder and guess what that's going to be throughout Part 2 to Part 3 and stuff like that. What the new story is going to be, my assumption out of all this would either be stuff relating to Sephiroth, given the knowledge that Sephiroth has, and or Aerith, but also Zack, right? The fate of Zack. Now, you could argue what happened with Zack, whether he's dead or alive, right? But at least the appearance from the end of Remake is that he is alive. But regardless of whatever's happening with Zack, that's a brand new story, right? Because Zack is straight up dead throughout all FF7, and you don't even really learn who Zack is till like towards the end of the game and shit. So whatever's happening with Zack is definitely all brand new shit for sure. But also with Remake itself being the 5th part of the compilation, so potentially a sequel of sorts, something that's happening post FF7 original, but also post like Dirge of Cerberus and Advent Children, the possibilities are kind of endless for things that could happen in characters that weren't in OG FF7. I mean, we've already seen Nero and Vice, right, with like the Yuffie DLC. So who knows who else could pop up, and all kinds of brand new things that could happen when it comes to Remake. But that'll be pretty much the video, my dudes. So of course, pass it off to you guys. We talked about only a few things really when it comes to this video, but the main talking points this last bit. So when it comes to Kitase confirming that there is going to be new story elements, it's not just all a nostalgia trip when it comes to the Remake project. What do you think those new story elements are going to be? That's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.